just in case I miss anybody's questions. My name is Barbara, and I will be your host effectively today for this presentation. We're going to talk about walking the Camino, and we're also going to concentrate a little bit on cycling the Camino. And I'm sure cyclists, if any of you are thinking of cycling, will be particularly interested in asking your own specific questions. So essentially, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the company, what we do, how we set about helping you to choose a route, and what you can expect from us in terms of advice and support and everything else like that. We were established in 2006, so we're operating quite some time now. We're a multilingual company. I'm one of the few Irish people working in the company. Many of my colleagues are Spanish natives and people from South America, New Zealand, Australia, Germany, France, all over. So we pretty much can cover any language issues that just might crop up while you're there or before you head out. The Camino, as most of you will probably know at this stage, is an ancient pilgrimage route that evolved to venerate the remains of St. James the Apostle, whose sarcophagus is buried in Santiago and after whom the city is named. And it's probably, I would think, probably the second most commonly visited city in terms of pilgrimage visits after Rome. It's a very important site for Christian pilgrimages. We have, as you also probably know, we support 9 of the routes to Santiago. There are many. Essentially, you could say all roads lead to Santiago. You can start from wherever you like, but naturally you prefer to be on a road that is waymarked. And there are 9 routes to Santiago, which are all waymarked very well and very easy to follow and safe to follow for pilgrims. We will talk to you about the route that specifically suits you. If you come and tell us you want to do a particular route, we're very likely to ask you why, just to be sure that the reason you're picking the route is going to work very well for you. It's sometimes we find ourselves pushing people to do something other than the original idea that they had, because we get a feeling very quickly for whether it's going to be too challenging for you or not challenging enough indeed for you. So we will talk to you specifically about the route that will suit you in particular. We'll also be giving you advice on training, what to pack, along with the things that we do for you. The company name, we are Follow the Camino. The company name is One Foot Abroad Limited, with Follow the Camino being our main brand. And we specialize mainly in walking. Vast majority of people will walk, but also cyclists. Some people will horse ride, and some people will even cover the distance by wheelchair. So not so many, needless to say, but it happens. We can help everybody. So we're in Dublin, in Ireland, even though most of our business is in Spain and France. The founder of the company is a French gentleman, Umberto di Venosa, and he is living in Ireland and has been living in Ireland for 20 years or so, which is why we are here. The fact that we're here doesn't take from your experience in Spain. We have a support network all over Spain, colleagues all over Spain, so we can help you with support on the ground when you're there. There are 10,000 kilometers of walking and cycling routes available to us to help you. So there's a huge choice. You won't be stuck for deciding what you might do. Our clients very often are English-speaking people from all over the world, but increasingly we're finding people from different South America and parts of Europe where English is not their first language. So we have a multilingual team, and we have a multilingual set of clients as well. We have a huge network of hotels all over Europe, in particular all over the Camino, and service providers, that is to say people who are our drivers, who will pick people up from airports and that sort of thing, and our luggage transfer people, a vast network of people who will bring your luggage from one hotel to the next. if you choose to use our luggage transfer service. That's not obligatory. But so while we're speaking to you about the route that you will like, we will be talking to you about what it is that you need, whether you're looking for a spiritual experience, a cultural experience, both a physical challenge or an easier route. So we'll talk through everything with you to make sure that the right route is going to work for you. We'll also be talking to you about the standard of hotel that you would wish to find, or whether you want something far more modest, pensions or even hostels, although many of the hostels, as you can imagine, are not open at the moment. But we're hopeful that they will find a way to be open next year. It's just very difficult for them, naturally, with dormitories to have a safe experience for people. So for the most part, at the moment, we're taking bookings specifically for hotels and for modest hostel. What they call a hostel in Spain is not a hostel. It's usually a 1-star type of standard, simple little place where you still have your own room and bathroom. Luggage transfers, I would strongly suggest to everybody that you use our luggage transfer service, because it's quite difficult to walk with a backpack after several days. You'll manage day 1, you'll manage day 2, day 3, you're going to start flagging a little bit, and by day 4 you'll wish, and by day 4 you'll be phoning us to say, I wish I had, and then we have to do all of the work to put that in place for you. So I would strongly suggest you make life easy for yourselves by allowing us to transfer your luggage from one place to the next, and you carry the lightest bag that you can with your valuables and your phone and your luggage, pilgrim passport, little bits and pieces, your water, your picnic if you're having a picnic. Before you travel, we'll be sending you a little holiday pack with the essentials that we cannot send you via email. In other words, your pilgrim passport, the little scallop shell, which is the emblem of the Camino. I can touch on that later if anybody wants to know why. Your guidebook, if we're sending you a guidebook, mostly we will have emailed you maps and walking notes already. Not every route will require a guidebook because we'll already have covered everything in our own walking notes. And anything else, your luggage tag, anything that we cannot email to you easily, we will be sending you in a little parcel before you go. The history of the Camino, you can see from this little map, I hope you can all see it, that Santiago is in the northwestern part of Spain in Galicia, the province of Galicia. And you can see that all of the routes merge, coming down across France and come up from Seville up through the center of Spain and from Lisbon up through Portugal. And they converge in Santiago, and all bar one of the routes will finish in Santiago. The one route that starts in Santiago is the Finisterre route, or Fistera in Galician language, and it starts in Santiago itself and goes out to the coast. It's the only one that starts in Santiago rather than finishes. People sometimes use that as a little add-on trip at the end of their Camino, and sometimes people do it as a standalone trip, fly into Santiago and just cover the little Finisterre section. In 2018, which was the last lot of statistics that we have access to, they don't have the last year's statistics available to us yet, but you can see there was almost 330,000 people arriving into Santiago, and those are just the people who went to get their pilgrim certificate. There'll be many, many people who arrived into Santiago and didn't, for whatever reason, collect their pilgrim certificate. And these numbers are still not where they would have been in the Middle Ages. In the 10th and 11th and 12th centuries, there were more people than this walking to Santiago. And bear in mind that they had to walk to Santiago from their homes, and having reached Santiago, turned around and walked home again. So it would have been a very different experience to the one that you will all have, because in the Middle Ages, you met people walking towards you. And so they would say, you know, you must stay in this town and you must go and stay in this monastery and you'll get a great feed if you go and stay in this farmhouse. So this is how the little towns and villages evolved and became the classic stops for pilgrims. It was the little bit of interactivity between the people coming and the people going to Santiago. The vast majority of people will walk. over 90% of people will be walking. Probably 5 or 6%, just over 6% of people will cycle. A tiny percentage of people then would horse ride or use some other way of getting there. Most of our clients will be over 30. There are lots of young people walking the Camino. They would mainly be Spanish in the summer months. You'll have a lot of very young Spanish people. It is a kind of a rite of passage, just as going to camp might be for people in the States, youngsters. Doing a section of the Camino is a rite of passage for young Spanish teenagers. So in the summer months, you'll find many Spanish people. We find our clients are usually interested in walking on, let's call it the shoulder seasons. So March, April, May, June, September and October. Not so many of our clients would walk during the summer months unless they're really good with dealing with heat. Nobody particularly wants to walk in July and August unless you're really good at dealing with heat. The vast majority, the huge bulk of people will walk the Camino Francés, not because it's more authentic, but purely because traditionally, if you can imagine people walking all across Europe and coming down to southwestern France and funneling across the little pass, the Napoleon Pass in the Western Pyrenees. So the Pyrenees became a funnel for everybody walking from all over Europe. And they would come down, cross the Pyrenees, and then trail across northern Spain through Burgos and Leon. And it's not more authentic, it simply is a fact that more people were arriving from that direction. People were coming up from Lisbon and joining in from all over Portugal, but needless to say, there were fewer people available to walk that route. So by necessity, you have about 60% of people walking the French way and maybe 20% or though, I'd say, walking the Portuguese way. Yeah, just under 21% at the last lot of statistics. And then a tiny percentage of people doing different routes. You know, the English way is very quiet. If you want to do the English way, it's going to be quite a meditative experience. The same for the Via de la Plata coming up from Seville. It's not so commonly walked. The northern way across the northern coast of Spain, from Santander and through Bilbao, or from San Sebastian, I should say, and over through Bilbao and Santander, is popular, but there's a lot of people who will go to one of those cities for a weekend and do a little bit of walking, and they won't cover the whole thing. So you will find other walkers, but not so many walking the full way. They will be, you know, walking just to Bilbao or just to Santander. Beautiful, beautiful coastline, absolutely beautiful coastline, but quieter, so not quite so sociable as the French way. If you are interested in getting your pilgrim certificate, you will need to cover at least 100 kilometers of one of the routes that finishes in Santiago. You've got to finish in Santiago to get the certificate. So it's, you know, a radius of 100 kilometers outside of Santiago and along one of the routes will allow you to get your pilgrim certificate. If you're cycling, it's going to be 200 kilometers that you need to cover. We will tailor the trips to suit you. So if you tell us that you're not able to manage these distances, we will look for ways to split the days up and change the days around so that you can cover a shorter distance in perhaps a longer number of days. You can spend up to 9 days over a week rather than perhaps 5 days. That can be done, providing, of course, we can find suitable accommodations along the way, but for the most part, we can do these things. Walking, I would say, slow holidays are becoming more and more fashionable again. So racing around and doing lots and lots of sightseeing is not quite as fashionable as it once would have been, and people are very happy to come and just enjoy every day's walk for itself and enjoy every bend in the road and every little piece of scenery that you see and every person you come across and meet and have a little conversation with. It's just slow. Find your own pace, and you will find your own pace. Cycling, there's a few things that I would say about people who want to cycle. You need to be very careful that you're not choosing to cycle because you think it's going to be easier. It's not. So if you're somebody who has a problem with your joints, you may well decide that you might like to cycle. I would strongly suggest you go to your local bike shop at home and hire a bike for a weekend and go out and cycle, 5 hours on Saturday, 5 hours on Sunday, and find out if you actually enjoy cycling. It's not for the faint-hearted. Most of the people will be using mountain bikes that we will supply, and they're, heavy enough frame to cope with the kind of terrain that you're likely to meet. And you need to know how to change a puncture. You need to be happy that you are cycling for that number of hours a day. And we'll find out pretty quickly, having spoken to you, whether it's going to work for you or not. We can tailor the distances to suit you. You'll see on our website that we have certain cycle trips on the website showing them to you with the distances. We can customize all of that. These are just suggestions. So if you need to cycle further or less, just talk to us. We can figure it all out with you. We include bike hire, mostly mountain bikes. We do have hybrid bikes as well, which are suitable for some routes, mainly the Portuguese way. And for those of you who'd like a little bit of help with your cycling, we have e-bikes as well, which are more like the hybrid. They're still quite a heavy frame. In fact, I think Caitlin has one of our e-bikes at the moment, just recently.
I sure do. It's excellent.
You do. I knew I'd seen it being brought out to your house a week or so ago.
They are definitely heavier. So when you're just pushing them around or like lifting them up steps, they're heavier. But once you get to a hill, it absolutely makes up for it.
And that's the other thing for people who might like e-bikes. It's not a motorbike. You do have to make an effort to do some cycling as well. So the bike will give you, maybe if you're completely on the flat, something like 60 kilometers battery power. But needless to say, if you're using it to get up hills, it's going to use up more of the battery. So you might get 40 kilometers of battery power, and you just use it wisely. Use it when you need it. Don't just expect the bike to bring you along. And we have had people who have expected that. The big advantage of cycling also is that you have the freedom to go off piste a little bit. So, where we will in the walking notes or in the guidebooks say, look, there's a very interesting little village 5 kilometers in that direction. Walkers might not have the energy or the time to go and do that. Cyclists will. So it does give you that little bit more freedom to go off piste and visit little places along the way. One of the things I've noticed myself over the years is that some people will say to us, some people will ask if they can bring their own pedals. And on the plus side, the moment we hear that, we know you're a cyclist. So this is good. If you're planning to bring your own pedals, we love you already. We know that you're going to be an independent kind of person who can cycle and understand how the bike works. If you want to bring your own pedals, if you're using cleats or something like that, absolutely do. But I would strongly suggest that you still allow us to deliver the standard pedals to you with the bike when the bike is delivered to your hotel, because you're quite likely to change your mind after a few days, unless you're doing a kind of a serious cycling challenge and you want to use the cleats. Give yourself the option to put the other pedals on and just have a more relaxed cycle. We will be giving you little panniers. They're soft, like little backpack panniers that just clip onto the back of the bike, so you don't have to have a little backpack. Makes it easier to cycle. And they're, I think, 15 kilogram, each of them 15 kilogram capacity. So if we happen to send the pedals, don't abandon them in your first hotel, because the poor cycle supplier isn't going to be necessarily back at that hotel in the next few weeks. So bring the pedals with you in the pannier so that they're there. We'll also be supplying tools, everything you need should you get a puncture, and you should make sure you know how to do that. We will have 24-hour support for you. So I'm trying to remember, one of my first groups of cyclists about 5 years ago were cycling a group of about 6 men cycling the French way. And one Friday evening at about 5 o'clock, they phoned the support number, and 2 of them had, at the same spot of the road, damaged the front forks of the bikes. I never found out what they did. I suspect they were racing. I suspect they hit the same pothole. We don't know. But they damaged the bikes. And we were able to get one of our Spanish colleagues to contact the local bike shop, who sent out a van, collected the 2 boys and the 2 bikes, brought the 2 boys to their hotel, brought the bikes back. It was somewhere near Burgos, had the bikes repaired and had the bikes back at the hotel the following morning, the Saturday morning, by 9:30. So that's what we can do for you, should you need us to help you while you're cycling. For the most part, you won't. Very rare for things to go wrong with the bike. But when it happens, you'll have our support number. If you're stuck and you're not able to sort the problem out yourselves, pick up the phone, call us. That's what we're there for. And we'll help you. We'll get somebody out to help you. Everything can be sorted. As I was saying, if you're an experienced cyclist, you need to be able to cycle for a few hours. If you're somebody who has joint problems and you fancy using a bicycle, as I said, rent a bike out. That's my personal suggestion. Rent a bike for a couple of days so that you understand that you're going to be able for it. If you want a sociable experience and you're going to do a solo Camino, I'd rather see you walking. If you want to cycle, we'll arrange it for you. If you're going on your own, you could find it quite lonely. You'll strike up a chat with people when you stop for coffee or when you stop to admire the view or go in to visit something, but you're not going to see those people ever again because you're cycling, more than likely cycling a longer distance. So you'll be in a hotel way ahead of theirs, and you'll meet people who'll be friendly, but you won't strike up that lovely, friendly kind of your own little Camino family. So cycling on your own, of course it can be done, but think twice about it if it is the case that you're looking for a sociable experience. Ideally, bring somebody with you, bring a pal, bring a friend, and the cycling will be more enjoyable. So as I was saying to you earlier, the most popular routes are those leading into Santiago, the last 100 kilometers, the most popular one being the last section of the French way from Sarria to Santiago. We call them 100 kilometers. They're all slightly more than 100 kilometers simply because the town where we can find accommodation is generally a tiny bit further than the 100 kilometer mark. You'll see the 100 kilometer marks when you start walking, and very often there is nothing there other than a mark at the side of the road. So we usually have to start you from a point generally about 115, 110, something like that, a little bit more than the 100. So we call it 100. It's generally a tiny little bit more. The second most popular section would be the last section of the Portuguese way from Tui to Santiago. Tui is about halfway between Porto and Santiago. Easy to get to, not as easy as some other spots, but easy enough. You can fly into Santiago or you can fly into Porto. Or if you're coming from the States and you're flying into Madrid, I would suggest you get an internal flight from Madrid west to the west of Spain to Vigo. And Vigo is an airport that is a hop, skip and a jump to Tui, maybe 15 minutes by taxi. It means you haven't got a big long transfer time to get to your start point. Similarly, the coastal section, last section of the Camino Francés, or Portuguese, I beg your pardon, is west of Tui to Santiago, almost parallel from Oia, working up the coast. And then both the coastal route and the inland route merge about 2 or 3 days walk south of Santiago. So the coastal route will be partially coastal and partially inland if you're doing the last 100 kilometers. The Camino Primitivo is not so commonly walked. It's probably the most beautiful Camino because it goes across close to Los Picos, wonderful, wonderful mountain ranges. Not so many people walking from where it starts in Oviedo down to Lugo. more people would walk from Lugo to Santiago. Again, the Camino Primitivo and the Camino Frances merge a few days walk before you reach Santiago. So if you choose to walk from Lugo to Santiago, you'll have 2 pretty quiet days when you won't meet very many people. And then suddenly when you merge with the Camino Frances, you'll notice a big increase in the numbers of people walking ahead of you and behind you, especially if you're in the busiest month of all would be September. So May and June are absolutely wonderful days, lovely long warm days to walk. Similarly, September is extremely popular. Colors are wonderful as you're walking through. And again, the Camino Inglés from Ferrol to Santiago, pretty quiet, not so commonly walked. There are a couple of very long days, so you need to be reasonably fit, plenty of ups and downs. All of them have plenty of ups and downs, apart from the Camino Portuguese, coastal way, very flat, very suitable for cycling from Porto if you're not a hugely experienced cyclist. To cycle from Porto up to Santiago along the coast is a fantastic cycle. And again, the Camino, the Via de la Plata from Seville, very little walked. The Camino Frances, you can see, if you can see this slide, from Sarria to Santiago, you can see the middle day from Palas to Arthua is 29 kilometers. There is a town midway, a very nice little town called Melide, so we can split that day about midway if you prefer to walk it over 6 days rather than 5. It's the most popular section. If you were worried about your fitness levels, or you had an older person walking with you and you're worried about them, we can split this walk up further so that you could do it over 9 days instead, if that suited you. And of course, you can always add on an extra day in Santiago if you want to do a little bit of sightseeing when you get to Santiago. It's quite hilly. From Sarria to Santiago has plenty of ups and downs, but it's perfectly doable for let's say beginners, people who aren't so used to hiking. We also will be giving you access to our training suggestions, and I would think if you can get out and walk for several hours on a Saturday and walk for several hours on a Sunday and do that a few times before you embark on your Camino, you'll be fine. It's usually the 3rd day that it kind of kicks in and you realize that you are doing a pilgrimage. But the fitter you are, the more you're going to enjoy your Camino. The Tui to Santiago, the last section of the Portuguese way, has less ups and downs. It's not quite as challenging as the last part of the French way. It hasn't got any mountains. It's more undulating hillsides, rolling hillsides, lots of forestry, lots of vineyards. If anybody is familiar with Albarino wine, you'll be walking through Albarino country, and very, very pretty, very, very pretty vineyards. And I was walking about 6 years ago on this section from Tui to Santiago, and I had left my pals, my family behind, and I was walking on my own, and I was flagging. I had no snack. I had just about enough water to finish the day. And an elderly lady who was picking grapes in the field beside me as I walked by in a vineyard just handed me a bunch. She took one look at me and she handed me a bunch of grapes. And I looked at them and they were so wizened and wrinkled and tired looking that I just thanked her and walked on, and I didn't think they were going to be edible. And they were the most glorious, the most beautiful, sweet grapes I've ever had in my life. And they gave me just that little boost of energy. She knew by looking at me that I needed a little boost to get through to Santiago. The last day is quite a long day, and I don't remember that being an issue at all. I think you're so excited to be getting close to Santiago, and you, even if you're not doing it for spiritual reasons, you'll find yourself getting excited when you're getting close to Santiago. And I don't think it matters so much. We can split the last day if you want us to split it, but I sometimes think it's a pity because everybody walking with you is heading for Santiago, and if you stop midway, I think it can be a little bit of a pity. But it's very pretty. It's not spectacular. It's not like crossing the Pyrenees. It doesn't have mountains, but it's very, very pretty. And a lovely starter section if you're not sure you know, if you thought I might like to do the whole French way in a couple of years, but you're just not sure, then walking from Tui to Santiago is a lovely taster of the Camino. Plenty of services en route. That wasn't always the case until a few years ago. In fact, we used to offer people picnics from Tui to Santiago because there were so few services along the way, but now there are lots of little cafes and little spots where you can stop and have a rest, lots of water fountains, which are perfectly usable. I use them all the time. You'll always find people who prefer to buy water. And if you do, there are places where you can buy. There are plenty of little shops here and there in the little villages along the way where you can buy water if you prefer. But the fountains are there. You'll find a couple of fountains every day, and they're perfectly safe to use. And they've been there for hundreds of years. They're usually little springs with a little tap, and they're lovely. And the local authorities will always have benches so you can sit down and rest when you come to a fountain. It's really nice. The full French way is quite a challenge. You don't have to do it all in one go. You could do it a week every year if you wanted, and we have lots of people who will do that, come back to us every year and do another little section. Or I had people today planning to split it into roughly 3 sections and do it over 3 years. If you have the time, if you're retired or you are, we sometimes find academics are the ones who have a little bit more time on their hands. If you've got time, it's a wonderful, wonderful experience to do in one go. I think you really, it's a life-altering experience to attempt the French way all in one go. It's going to take you at least 34 walking days. I would strongly suggest, if you have the time and the budget, that you build in a few rest days. Also for cyclists, build in a rest day somewhere to catch your breath. And the advantage also, I think, of having a rest day here and there is that if you're walking with the same people every day, it's nice to have a rest day, and then you have slightly different people to meet. And then a few days later, some of the people you had become friendly with in the early stages will take a rest day somewhere else. And suddenly you meet people again that you had met a week or so previously. And it's a really nice way to mix and match the kind of social experience you're having, so that you have a little taste of everybody that's walking along with you. We've split it into 8 sections. And of course you can stop and start wherever you would like, but we would strongly suggest you stop in one of the larger cities along the way, Burgos or León or Ponferrada, simply because you'll find far better public transport access by train or by bus down to Madrid or up to Bilbao or to the nearest airport to get home. So if you're going to break it into sections, do your best to break it in the larger cities. It's what we will be suggesting. If you want to do something else, absolutely, talk to us. We'll do anything that you want us to do. On the website, you'll notice that we have 3 cycling trips from Roncesvalles to Burgos through Navarre and Rioja. And then the next section from Burgos over to Ponferrada through the Meseta, the Great Plain of central Spain, and the last section from Ponferrada to Santiago. These are our 3 suggestions. They're customizable. You don't have to stick to these at all. They're merely there as suggestions. Talk to us if you're interested in cycling. I've had people do all of the routes. We don't have the Northern Way as a suggestion, but I've had clients cycle it. I've had clients cycle the Via de la Plata. The difference is you probably need to be quite independent. We don't have cycling. You'll be dealing with the walking notes, and we'll say to you, read a couple of days together at breakfast time, because we don't have specific cycling notes for the routes that are rarely requested by cyclists. But I've had people do it. If you're an experienced cyclist and you're independent and you fancy doing the Via de la Plata or the Northern Way or even the inland route from Lisbon, I've had people cycle up through Portugal and from Tui up to Santiago. So talk to us. We customize whatever you would like us to do. I'm not going to repeat myself by saying all of that because I think I've said all of that. The coastal route, whether you're walking it or whether you're cycling it, the coastal route from Porto up to Vigo, and then it comes inland along the estuary of Vigo and up to Santiago inland. The towns on that coastal route have become destinations themselves. So Spanish and Portuguese people will visit these towns, particularly Povoa de Varzim and Viana do Castelo, Bayona in particular. Those three cities are very often visited as holiday destinations. So they don't have that same ethos of a pilgrimage route. So bear that in mind. If you're going to do the coastal route, either on foot or cycling, the kind of hotels are not going to be what you might in your minds expect as pilgrimage types of places, because they simply don't exist in those little towns. So you'll be staying in mostly very comfortable 3-star. There are upgrades available, paradors available in several of those towns. But just bear in mind, if you want something that feels very authentic and you'd like to be in Portugal, I'd say possibly pick the inland route. Again, we'll talk to you about what you prefer to do. We're suggesting 5-day cycling. Again, talk to us if you want to do less or more. Just talk to us. The same, we call it our Vuelta. It's not really the Spanish Vuelta. It covers a different route, but we call it our Vuelta challenge. And if you wanted to really challenge yourselves physically, we can do it. The challenge for us is to get your luggage transferred. You can see one of these days is 107 kilometers. So we have to get the guys to cover more distances with your luggage. So that's really a big part of the logistics for us, is to get everything moved the same distance that you're cycling when you're covering quite long distances every day. But we do it all the time. And you need to be fit for this. Really lovely route. Bring a friend. I would say don't try and do this on your own. So you can see we have a training plan both for cyclists and for walkers, and very few people will be at the very basic level. If we say walk for 30 minutes, 4 days a week, the likelihood is you'll be able to do more than that. But you can find your start point somewhere along the way and bring yourself up to the point where you're going to be able to cover the distance without really feeling whacked every evening. You should feel pleasantly tired and delighted with yourselves. You should never feel that you're not going to be able to go on, really. I think the fitter you are, the less likely it is that you are going to feel like that. We have lots of suggestions in our blogs about what to pack and what not to pack. As a very basic rule of thumb, I would say less is more. If you put everything out on your bed that you're going to pack, you probably should be looking at packing half of that. You don't need special clothes for the evening or for Santiago. You know, usually the clean clothes that are going to be worn the next day is probably what you're going to be wearing in the evening. I would say bring your walking shoes or whatever it is that you are comfortable walking in. Make sure they're not new. Have your walking shoes well walked, well used before you embark on your Camino. And in the evening, try to bring something like flip-flops or open-toed sandals, something that will give your feet a complete break in the evening so that you don't have to wear the same walking shoes all the time. The bigger towns along the way on all of the routes will have shops where you can buy spare walking gear. So you don't have to bring so much in case you lose a t-shirt along the way, or in case you leave something here or there. Less is more. In the months, for example, March and April, we'd say bring a fleecy, something like that for the evenings, or when it gets a little bit cooler in the evening. Probably not going to need that in September, but yeah, I'd say always bring a little fleecy for the evenings. lots of times you're going to be able to wear shorts. I think the walking trousers that have the zip-on legs so that you can have shorts or long legs, really light, so that they, if you get wet, they'll be dry in 10 minutes if you sit down, go in somewhere and have a coffee. But we'll talk to you about that as well. And we've got lots of really, really good advice in our blogs about packing. We would ask, if you're using the luggage transfer service, we would ask you to limit yourself to 20 kilograms per suitcase. If you need to carry more because you're going on somewhere else to do something else after the Camino, tell us and we'll take that into account, either a slightly heavier bag or you might need a separate bag. There are lots of ways of handling this. Certainly, if you were doing the full French way and you had 2 suitcases, one of which is not going to be used until you're finished and it's, your other holiday stuff, you can send it on to Santiago so that it will be waiting for you when you get there. So there are ways around everything. Talk to us. But the reason we have the 20 kilo limit is really for the poor guys who are lifting bags from hotels into the van and lifting them from the van into so many hotels, and they're carrying stuff all the time. And so it's really for them, for their health and safety, that we would ask you to keep it to the 20 kilo mark. But talk to us if you need to do something else. Everything can be sorted. I hope you've had a sense, or I hope you've grasped that we're here for you. We will support you. We'll make sure you're doing the right trip. We'll make sure you've got all the support you need while you're walking or cycling. Our job is to be, we're not with you, we're with you virtually, let's say. We're at the end of the phone and we'll be delighted to help you. And I really, really hope you contact us to have your trip organized. You will be allocated to your own dedicated Camino planner. I'm one of a team. So I'd love to talk to any and all of you at a later stage. Once you can make plans, at least make definitive plans. I realize at the moment that everything is falling into the realms of fantasy planning, but I think it's a really good idea to do the planning, get the details in place, and then when you're able to push the button, the plan will be in place and you can push the button once you can book your flights, etc. So we're here to help. We have everything we need to help you. So I've told you how flexible we are. You can change your dates. This is something we've introduced because things happen, especially the way the world is at the moment. If you need to postpone and if something goes wrong and the world changes again on its axis and you have to pull back and say, I can't go, talk to us. There is no charge. We will rearrange everything, postpone and rearrange everything for you for no charge. We're about to, in the next couple of days, introduce the possibility of changing everything around for no charge up to 10 days before you travel. That's pretty flexible, I think about as flexible as we could reasonably be. So up to 10 days before you travel, you have the possibility of changing everything around. And for your time today, you will all be receiving a €50 voucher as a little thank you for giving us your time and for being patient with us. It took a little while for us to get started. It usually does, to get everybody rounded up and present. So that's it. That's it from me. Are any questions that Caitlin will tell me about?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. Can you do a combination of cycling and walking, Barbara?
Yes, this is something that is very commonly done, and I should have covered that. What could happen is you might say, I would love to do the Camino Francés, but I just don't have a month. So we would then suggest maybe walking for the first section, maybe cycling from Burgos over as far as Ponferrada, across the Meseta. You could spend maybe a week cycling, which would cover, 2 or 3 weeks of what people might walk. So certainly you could walk and cycle and then walk again. Same with the Portuguese way. You could do a little bit of cycling and then walk. Bear in mind that if you want your certificate, you should either completely walk the last 100 or cycle the last 200. I've had people in the past ask me if they could have a bike and just use it when they want it. If you think about the logistics of that, it just doesn't work, because our bike supplier is in Santiago. So the bike is sent out to wherever you would start from, and you will cycle back to wherever you're going to leave the bike, and he picks it up from there. But if you want to mix and match, for example, and cycle one day and walk another day, the bike is going to get left behind. We don't have people to move your bike every couple of days for you. So bear that in mind. If you want to mix and match, we'll be asking you to do at least a few days of cycling together and then walking, or the other way around, whichever. But yeah, absolutely. You want to do a little bit of both? Completely. We're happy to do that. Have you any other questions, Caitlin?
If I don't know how long I'm going to have and I want to start walking and then potentially extend, can I do that?
Absolutely. I have a guy who finished a week or so ago, an Englishman, and because the way things are at the moment, he booked about a week. He did the full French way. He booked a week and then phoned us. You know, he started phoning us on a Friday to say, I'm going to do another week. And I had to say to him, stop phoning me on a Friday. Please phone us at least on Wednesday. So we have a little bit of time. But yeah, he booked it in little increments as he walked along, because he was never sure at any stage what the world was going to throw at him and what he might have to do. But he finished the full French way, and he walked last week out to Finisterre. So yes, absolutely. If you want to do a little bit and you're not quite sure what you can commit to, yeah, just give us a couple of days notice if you need to book another section and walk another section. Be kind to us and we'll be kind to you. So yeah, you can do that. Anything else, Caitlin?
That's all the questions I've got so far. Does anyone else have a question that they want to pop in there? Feel free to unmute if you'd just like to have a chat with us.
Oh yeah, do unmute if you need to talk. Sometimes it's easier to just say whatever it is that you have on your head. In your head. And you know where to find us? info@followthecamino.com. We watch that all the time, so one of us will get back to you very quickly if you email us there, and then you'll be allocated to one of the team from there on. The phone numbers, incidentally, are low call numbers, so if you want to call us from the US or the UK or Canadian numbers, it will be transferred. It'll come through to us here in Dublin, but you'll be charged. It's either free or just for a local call. I'm not sure which, Caitlin, but very little. You're not charged for calling Ireland. Now, anybody else?
I just got an email asking if someone can walk with their dog.
I've met people walking with their dogs, and I've met people whose dogs have their own little backpack. Met a young Italian guy, and his little dog had panniers, and he had his water bottle and his bowl on one side, and he had his food on the other side. They were all camping. Okay, so yes, of course you can bring your dog. Think about the dog before you embark on doing that. Dogs don't necessarily like to walk 20, 25 kilometers every day. The little pads on their paws can get very, very sore. The challenge for us is to find hotels and places that will be happy to accommodate your dog. And that's where the difficulty can come in, that sometimes, you know, trying to find a place might give you a particularly long day. So the logistics can be difficult. Technically, yes, of course you can. You want to make sure that your dog doesn't need a visa or a passport to travel from wherever it is that you're bringing the dog. So we have in the blog, in our blog posts, if you just do a search for dog, you'll find, I think Caitlin wrote a very good article about the logistics of bringing your dog on the Camino. And there are certain things that you'd have to think about logistically before you countenance doing it. But yep, talk to us and we try and do that for you if you would like to do that. You can also bring your children. They're easier.
Yeah, definitely easier.
I had I had a conversation with, he didn't travel with us. He was a teacher in Ireland and had been teaching small kids for many years. And he told me that he had brought his 4-year-old and 6-year-old, and they did the full French way. They did half one year and half the following year. And every day he had dreamt up a little story to tell them, and he just kept drip feeding the story. So every time they flagged, he'd say, and I'll tell you what happened to the prince when we get to the top of that hill. And so he drip fed the stories to them until they got the whole, I can't believe he walked the full way over 2 years with these little small kids who are now grown up and refuse to walk anywhere with him. So,
it's a trap. They know his tricks now.
So be careful before you ask your kids to walk the full French way. But our boss, Umberto, has walked the Portuguese coastal way with his youngest little fellow was about 8 at the time. His kids were 8 and 10, and they loved it. And of course, the coastal way is fantastic for kids because there are beaches and a lot of the hotels have pools. So, you know, kids with lots of energy can use up their energy in the evening, and you can stop and have a lovely picnic and a swim, etc. So Portuguese coastal way is fantastic if you're thinking of bringing kids. We don't have kids bikes. Just be careful. I think 135 centimeters in height is the smallest person that we can supply a bike for. So bear that in mind as well. We will be asking you about the frame size you need and telling you how to go about finding out which frame size suits you in the event that you don't know how to do that.
Great. Someone's asked, is the video available to watch again later? Absolutely. So once we finish this up, the recording will be uploaded on YouTube, and we will email you all a link. So you're welcome to send that on to friends if you like, or get them to get in touch with us. We're obviously happy to answer any questions that you have. But yes, the video will be available to watch again later, and you're welcome to share it with friends.
I won't be watching it.
Barbara doesn't like watching herself.
No.
Alrighty, well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks for giving us your time. Again, if you have any questions at all, please do get in touch with us. Send us an email, and we will be happy to help. So thanks again, and have a great evening or morning, wherever you are.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon, I hope. Take care. Bye, all.